Hi, I'm Nikolaj Severin, concept artist with the LEGO Ninjago design team in my home office. Let's draw a ninja. In this video, I'm gonna break down all the little details that go into sketching and capturing a minifigure ninja. First thing I do is consider the expression I want the ninja to have. For this, some examples could be heroic, excited, explosive, or fighting. I try to find or come up with some poses that convey that. Normally, I'd go online and find a bunch of pictures, but for this, to not steal other people's work, I've sketched some pose studies myself for us to work from. When I look at a pose for inspiration, I pay attention to the overall curves of the pose, but importantly also the directions of key features such as the head, shoulders, pelvis, hands, and feet. I then sketch fast and loose when I try to pack my impressions of this pose into something with the rough proportions of a LEGO minifigure. This first impression is important to hang on to keep that original idea and energy as we start refining all the parts of a ninja later. I'll do a few more examples. I'll just repeat, your first experiments with a pose should be loose. Only focus on the energy and rough proportions. As soon as you have a rough sketch, copy or photograph it if you can, before refining the drawing. Alternatively, you can find an image of a minifigure online, or from the show. You can get a cool pose from there as well. Whether you want to stick to how a LEGO minifigure can move in real life, or want to be more dynamic as we see in the animation, that's a style choice. I like to see how dynamic poses I can get out of a minifigure. Now that we have a few poses, let's break it down. Let's start with the head. Again, freehand sketching here. What you've probably noticed is that it's a cylinder, but if we pay more attention, we notice that it is slightly squat, meaning it isn't as tall as it is wide. Furthermore, the edges aren't sharp but beveled, which gives the otherwise boxy minifigure a slightly softer look, slightly more human. The neck is wide, and usually the only shape we deform when posing the figure. The head itself is also wide, or big, as it is almost as wide as the shoulders. Then, of course, it has a stud on top, which is a good reminder that whatever headgear we draw later needs to be bulky enough to fit that inside. When planning the face, I suggest drawing a cross for the center and work from there. Notice how the face is about half the height and width of the head. And don't get bogged down too tightly with the specifics of this, but be mindful of it when you draw. Otherwise, you might end up with a round brick, which I once saw someone make for a handcrafted wooden minifigure. Now for the body. Introducing giant minifigure J here to help us out. The base proportion of the body is square, which is usually enough to remember when doing rough sketches for the minifigure. However, the actual torso piece is a trapezoid. Unlike the head, it is also beveled, at this times at the shoulders. If you want to be precise, the bottom part of the torso is vertical, before ending in the leg piece. And remember, the torso is thick. It is half as thick as it is wide. When drawing the torso, try to get the proportions first and then establish the top and bottom planes. But if you're doing something where the perspective or pose is really wild, try and start with the top and bottom plane and then connect them. Let's take a look at the arms and hands. On the toy, the arm has two often overlooked features. First, the upper arm is significantly longer than the lower arm, and the arm morphs from a flattened half cylinder in the top to a full smaller cylinder at the wrist. However, when I draw them, I generally treat it as a tube, especially when the arm comes up high. For the hands, they are of course also tubes, but there are a few things to notice. The wrist, for example, attaches to the bottom of the hand and at a slight angle. It's not in the center. And the bottom part of the hand is rounded off quite a bit, giving more direction and softness to the hand than a full hard-edged cylinder. Moving on to the legs. These are, in my opinion, some of the most challenging when we draw a ninja because of the dynamic poses we want our heroes to strike. On the toy, they don't do much. They go back and forth. But in drawing an animation, we can do more if we work for it. Starting out with base form, they're slightly taller than they are wide. And they have the signature front-side buttocks, which comes from the circular shape going from hip to hip through the center. The reason they're in the front is because we want the legs to have feet and still be square so they fit on studs. How the legs are made up of several distinct geometrical shapes makes them quite tricky to pose. This is where a rough pose sketch comes in handy, to remind you what you want the legs to do before the drawing becomes technically challenging. I warp and cheat a lot with the perspective to make it work, but I always try to have the cylinder going through the pelvis and have the footprints be square. Similar to the torso, a way to draw the legs is to place the plane where the body meets the legs and then place the footprints and sketch in between there. Try to see how far you can push it, and pull back if it doesn't work. The legs will always try to be stiff and boring, so you really need to force it to get them to live. Alright, with the basic minifigure done, let's look at the mask. The reason I pay so much attention to the head in these sketches is that I always sketch the head first and then fit the mask over it. I start by placing the eye slit shape on the head. The exact shape of course depends on the mask design, but with this mask, it's slightly butterfly shaped. Based on that, we can add the features of the mask, and I start by establishing the centerline and outmost points of the mask, and I'm very mindful of the thickness of the material. The supposed fabric is very thick. When I have the overall shape of the mask in place, I establish that the cloth is tight across the front of the face, with a tight centerline and no wrinkles, and then it becomes looser as it moves towards the back. Choose the direction of the flow of cloth and work from there. Armor and outfit. Here it's more open-ended, depending on what original design you want to make or which season you want to portray. One thing I suggest, whatever you do, is go big. Most ninja armor is more chunky than you imagine. And yes, the piece that I'm drawing here is made up, just for the demo. When designing your own armor, I suggest experimenting with layering and other classical features of ninja and samurai armor, and then add flair and personality to that. And when it comes to the gi, the options are endless. I mean, just look at Jay here. Again, I suggest getting the base form and most important ideas on first, and then add details around that. And last, but not least, weapons. Again, with weapons you have so many options. No matter what you do though, make the weapon big. The standard katana is longer than the minifigure is tall, just for reference. And they're really thick compared to real weapons as well. You'll see, in order to fit nicely in a minifigure hand, the weapon really needs to be bulky. Now, if you want to design your own weapon, just like with the armor and gi, I suggest you sketch the basic properties of the weapon first, and then add whatever ideas and flair you have onto that at the end. Alright, having gone through the entire minifigure, let's see how it looks when I put all of this onto one of the blue sketches I did in the beginning. As you can see, I keep a faint version of the sketch I did in the beginning to remind myself of the pose and energy I wanted to convey before I now move into all of these technical drawing details. And there we go, all ready to be lined up and colored in. And there we go. I really hope this was inspiring, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with. Be Ninja.